It is the Martha Zoller show, and we didn't hear the very beginning of it, but what I heard of it was very gracious. We're going to bring Bill Crane in right now. And look, Bill, there's going to be a lot made of the fact that Nikki Haley did not throw immediately her endorsement behind Donald Trump when she promised on the debate stage to support the Republican nominee. The way I would justify that is she needs a few days to kind of figure out what she's going to do. She's got some leverage right now with the Trump campaign as far as helping to bring her voters in. And he's not the nominee yet. I think she will be fully on board by the time the convention comes through, and probably sooner.
I was going to start there. He is not yet the nominee. In addition, I think Governor Haley provides a voice to, I'm just going to call them disaffected Republicans who have not been enamored probably since January 6th, if not before, with some of the choices Donald Trump has made, more in terms of his temperament and the way he's run things than his policy choices. But right now, in poll after poll, 20 to 30% of GOP base voters are uncomfortable with Donald Trump being the nominee, and around 20 to 25% say they will not vote today for Donald Trump if he is the nominee. And we're not talking about independents yet. That makes the math very difficult, as weak as Joe Biden is as an incumbent president, to win in November. So if nothing else, she serves kind of as a nudge or a guidepost to, she's not going to see grace out of President Trump. He's not going to suddenly become a nice guy. We're not going to see a personality or temperament shift. But there are issue positions where he can stake out ground that would attract back some suburban women, that would attract back disaffected, what I'll call Chamber of Commerce, business-focused Republicans on economic issues and concerns, if he wants to capture the White House. He cannot continue to attack anyone who ever has any difference with him. And as we saw last night, even when he won 14 of 15 states, he chose to attack essentially local elections officials and say the way we run elections is like a third world country. That's just, I know people can't control him, and his staff are having a hard time keeping his message box. But he had a historic win last night, and Nikki Haley only carried Vermont and was close on Utah and Virginia, and he could have displayed a little bit of grace and thanked the volunteers and machines, and he did that a little bit, but he still had to get his shots in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I think that, honestly, we know that the Trump supporters are going to be with him. And he really does need someone like Nikki Haley. He doesn't need another Donald Trump as his running mate. I wish he would put her in as the running mate. I don't know if she would take it or not, but I do think that that is the right way to go on that, because it would show a uniting of the party, much like Reagan did with George Herbert Walker Bush.
In 1980, no one believed in the immediate aftermath of what was a closer contest for that nomination. Well, first, 1976, Gerald R. Ford and Ronald Reagan were running competitively after Reagan lost 5 states in a row. And at the end, at convention, they were talking about a co-presidency, which they abandoned before Gerald Ford was made the nominee and lost to Jimmy Carter. But in 1980, there was a pretty bruising contest between Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and the other Republicans down ticket, who thought Reagan was too much of an arch conservative and potentially too old, but that did heal. I'm not sure right now, just for the moment, putting Donald Trump's legal and financial challenges aside, that scab's going to heal really quickly. It is the fastest we've kind of gotten through a nominated contest, and for all intents and purposes, by after the Georgia primary votes next Tuesday, with the other states that are also coming, the former president may have enough votes to secure the nomination, but he still has other obstacles, and part of one of those largest obstacles is himself.
Yeah, I mean, it is, it is one of those things. We got a message in from someone that said, I think the Republicans need to stop squabbling with each other and focus on winning the election. Like him or hate him, he will be the candidate. And now we need to unify and be sure everyone votes. Our lives will be affected by this election. And look, that's the mission of every election, right, Bill, is you've got to unify the party, and then you've got to pick up some extra votes. And even if the worst is true about the Nikki Haley supporters, which is most of them are Democrats, I don't think that's true. I think out of the 25 or 30% she got in most primaries, probably 5 to 10% were crossover voters. So you still got 15 or 20% of Republicans that voted for Nikki Haley in a primary, which are your most active voters. I think that number's bigger in the general Republican electorate. And we need to, he needs to be gracious. I don't know if he'll be mad at what she said. I think he wants everyone to kiss the ring immediately, but I think she's right to take a few days.
I'm a critic, generally speaking, of the chances of the third party, but I will point out in this particular test, given the dynamics of the two likely nominees of the Democratic Party renominating their incumbent, a weak Joe Biden, and the Republican Party most likely moving forward and nominating Donald Trump, given the polling data and exit polling on both sides, on Joe Biden's side, there are young voters and African-American voters, particularly African-American men, who expressed concern or disappointment that Joe Biden did not deliver on campaign promises made in 2020. And there are concerns about his cognition and age. We don't need to repeat the concerns about Donald Trump on the Republican side. But with the largest and fastest growing segment of voters being independent by self-identification, 30-35%, and both the GOP and the Democratic Party losing voter identification, there's a path for a third party or an independent candidate. I'm not sure it's Robert Kennedy. I'm not sure Nikki Haley is still considering that. But by not endorsing today, that door is cracked, not necessarily open. If you cobble the 15 to 20% of disaffected Democrats and the 15 to 20% of disaffected Republicans and the usual 15 to 20% in the middle who decide the elections, you've got a plurality. You may not have a majority, but a plurality in a pile of states gets you into an electoral college contest, depending on the states, where all, and some of which are apportioned by vote, that you could have someone who's not a Democrat and not a Republican for the first time since 1800s take the White House.
Well, and we had, on the Republican side, we had the most diverse group of candidates we've ever had. We had a Republican woman get farther than a Republican woman has ever gotten. I love the fact she quoted Margaret Thatcher. I thought that was appropriate and good. And I like that she waited till this morning so that she could kind of have the news by herself and let everybody hear about that. I think that's fine. I mean, I voted for her in the primary, and that's next week, so I guess my vote doesn't count. I suspect that
it still counts. They're going to be paying attention.
And I suspect that Gabe, and I talked to Gabe Sterling, they expect that they had 3 days of really high turnout, but this may suppress the turnout for the rest of the early voting.
Well, certainly on the Republican side, but you've got Donald Trump and Joe Biden coming to Georgia. Donald Trump's going to Rome. I can't remember where in Metro Atlanta Joe Biden's going. But both of them are already shooting at November, and this being a battleground state, and they want their respective party primary to be larger, not to mention there are special elections on top of that election day. So unlike most general presidential primaries, and we had the exception during 2020 because of COVID and the pandemic, they combined the general primary and the presidential primary. This time you have a number of special election contests for sheriff, state representative, county commissioner out in the state, as well as ballot questions on bond referendums and other matters. So there are reasons for people to go beyond the presidential contest.
In
but
local
I think
areas.
both Joe Biden and Donald
absolutely.
Trump will tell you still matter.
So one final question. Do you think any of this uncommitted kind of stuff on the Democrat side, where you've got anywhere from 5% to 19% in the case of Michigan last week, of people that are pulling a Democrat ballot but putting on their uncommitted? Now, there's a movement in Georgia for people to pull the ballot and not vote, but that I don't think they can't count that. I checked with Gabe Sterling about that you won't know how many people did that.
I do think there's a message being effectively sent to the White House that you ain't the guy. I mean, we may still vote for you, but I think what a lot of Democrats are saying, probably not going to vote for Donald Trump, but they'll sit on their hand. People that are saying none of the above now, the Democratic presidential preference primary, in the greater likelihood, aren't active, aren't organized, don't turn out. And here in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, who is still kind of out there and raising money for a variety of causes and hasn't given up her political, personal ambitions. Fair Fight Georgia and Vote Georgia and several of the nonprofits she put together have spent most of their fundraising on legal challenges and other things, and their banks are depleted. They're not going to be the turnout machine for the Democratic Party in 2024 that they were in 2022. And that will impact Georgia's status not only as a battleground state, but the results.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being with us today. It's a big day in politics, and it's a big day for all of us as we stay involved in this election process. Thanks for being with me, Bill.